Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to welcome my wonderful class to our public sharing, and also to welcome back our auditors and welcome the people who have decided to join us to hear the work. We've been working for the past 4 weeks in documentary theater mode, which is a form that some people call me the mother of the form, which makes me feel extremely young because I could be the grandmother of the form. But I wanted to share this with a group of people because I think it's a form that's particularly interesting for this moment in time. So this class got together with 10 writers, many of whom had never worked in this form before, to create monologues that are addressing the moment in time in which we're living, which is an extraordinary moment in time, both on a level that has to do with the pandemic that the globe is sharing, but also in terms of the days of reckoning politically that are happening now at this moment in time. This group embraced this wholeheartedly and has come in with such beautiful work that I wanted to share it with more people than just our fellow students here in the class. So welcome all. I won't speak long because I want the work to speak for itself, but I just wanted to say this is my last day as McCarter Theater's artistic director and resident playwright. I want to thank you all for your incredible support over the years, and I cannot think of a more fitting way to end my artistic directorship than with this class and these students. So without further ado, we're going to have the students read their own work, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of race or ethnicity. The writer will read the words, highly edited words of their subjects, and they'll go one after the other. I will introduce each one, and then we'll take a second to digest and go on to the next. We'll take a 5-minute break after that so we can just let everything sift for a moment and then come back and have a discussion. All right, so let us begin. Lorna Haughton, Amakuru Ki.
Murray's house in Jamaica, Queens. Upon entering the 3rd floor, you're taken in by the perfectly shined dark floors, African art, and the very colorful Turkish lamp. Murray, 51, glances over at CNN, where there's a heated discussion over the racial issues fracturing America. She listens intently for a few seconds, then turns off her TV. She makes herself a large cup of tea, sits at her exquisite mahogany dining table, and lets out a deep sigh. So let me start from the beginning. I came here as an immigrant from Africa, and I was running away from oppression. I was running away from hatred. I was running away from whatever was going on back in Rwanda. And when I arrived here, even though I didn't speak English, I liked it. I was like, I am not leaving United States of America. My sister Florence, because we spoke French, wanted to go to Canada so she doesn't have to learn any other new language. But I stayed here because I saw, I would say maybe like, I saw a country that adopted me in a few months. When you come here, you know, everybody talks about racism. Even when I was in Rwanda, they spoke about racism in America. When I got here, like many other Africans, and I say Africans, I don't know about Caribbean people. When we get here, we want one thing in mind. We want that opportunity. We are willing to overlook or forgive racism. I was coming from a country where we had tribalism. I was coming from a country where my tribe was being killed. When I got here and I didn't see anybody to kill me, nobody was going to kill me because I was Black. I said to myself, this is way, 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 way better. And I can stay here. And I started excusing racism like many other African people. I started feeling like it's a Black American issue. They're not easy like my first 5 years. But then somebody told me about a book or an article that they read saying that when you go through something like the genocide or the Holocaust, it changes your DNA. It changes who you are. And then the kids you're going to have, the DNA will be altered. So then I started thinking, oh, maybe this is what happened to the Black people here. They went through some oppression. They went through some unbelievable things that it completely altered their DNA. And that is what we have now. I read books and articles after when they say that slavery ended. How were Black people treated and were they able to assimilate in like the American society? It was impossible for them to find themselves after that. There's no way you and I will be somewhere and then they say, okay, you can go. You have nowhere to go. They're giving you nothing. They put you in some neighborhood that they're not going to help at all, but they expect you to do well. It was not until that moment that I understood that when they say slavery ended, when they say segregation ended, nothing had actually ended. So then I had kids, and I know I had kids who are Black American because they were born here. And then that made me feel like I not only need to understand what's going on, but I need to help them deal with this. Once they're born here and they cannot change the color of their skin, they're going to feel it. I heard something very recently from Alma that the school didn't post anything about Black Lives Matter. They actually posted about All Lives Matter. The students were upset and they contacted the school and the school had some Zoom meetings. Alma talked and she said when she was in elementary school, she used to be in a class with a math teacher who didn't think girls were as smart as boys. In her view, he was sexist. When it was time to choose high school, she said she did not want to go to a high school where she had to fight sexism and racism. She said, since I cannot change my race, since I'm always going to be Black, I'm gonna go to an all-girls school where nobody's going to compare me in math. To me, that was very profound. And that is when I said to myself, she's 17 years old and this is how she feels. She has to fight at this age. When Black Lives Matter started, they came to me and say they want to march. In the beginning, I told them that I don't think we should go marching because there's COVID and we don't want to catch it and whatever. And then at one point, I'm like, I'm raising Black American kids. I need to raise them like how any Black American kid is going to be raised. They need to understand the issues. So we went on the street. We went marching with the marchers so they can also express themselves and feel like they are supported. Of course, as an African person without like an ancestor who was a slave, I understand it differently and I don't carry that in my DNA. But the Black American people carry that in their DNA.
Oh, Lorna, that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. For those who are not in the class, this is a new piece from Lorna that she did not read yet. So it was a fresh experience for many of us. And talk about profound and complex. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to Anthony Arnove. You cannot depend on the existing institutions to solve your problems.
Juan Gonzalez, born in 1947 in Ponce, Puerto Rico. My mother is 92 and she is increasingly frail, but she's always insisted on being on her own. She was living up in the Bronx and we were down here in Brunswick when the pandemic hit. The person who's taken care of her got sick with COVID, so she had no aid anymore. Then she got sick with intense abdominal pain, and we had to figure out what to do. This was at the high point of the pandemic in the city. Obviously, we couldn't leave her by herself, so Lilia and I decided to drive into the Bronx and bring her down to New Brunswick. She was here for only 2 days before the pain became unbearable. We had to take her to the hospital. After several days, she didn't have a fever, and they were getting ready to release her. But by that time, Lilia was sick. And I told the doctor, I can't handle 2 people with COVID here. So they actually released my mother to a rehab center. Lilia had major splitting headaches and at one point became delirious. We called 911 to see if she needed to go to the hospital. But when the EMTs came, they said, look, you know, her airflow is still good. I'll take her to the hospital if you want, but I'm telling you, chances are they're going to send her back home. I know it's the worst you've felt in your entire life, but as long as you're able to get enough air into your lungs, it's probably better to stay home. We couldn't get a COVID test, either myself or Lilia, for weeks. There were no tests. My mother, they tested her only after they decided they had to admit her to the hospital to figure out which part of the hospital to put her. That was strange to me, that even in a hospital, they weren't testing people for COVID. The key thing is the total lack of preparation of our healthcare system for any kind of pandemic like this. In 1969, I ran the preventative health programs that we had in the Young Lords. I was Minister of Education and Health. We began first with lead poison detection, working with medical students, going in teams door to door in East Harlem and South Bronx, getting urine samples of children to document the extent of lead poisoning in the tenements. Lead poisoning was massive at that point. Eventually, we ended up getting the city council to pass legislation to eliminate lead-based paint from all tenements in New York City. It's still the law, though many landlords are not fully in compliance. We used to do tuberculosis screening, and we would walk into the emergency room at Metropolitan Hospital in East Harlem or Lincoln Hospital in the South Bronx and set up our own tables, taking complaints of patients waiting 5 or 6 or 7 hours to be seen by a doctor. Of course, the hospitals would always try to throw us out. We were putting forth a 10-point program on healthcare, which included a variety of issues, including community and worker control of the hospitals, an emphasis on preventative care, and the patient's right to know. Early on in the Young Lords, we understood that healthcare is a huge industry. We never realized how big or profitable it would get. But we understood that the essential issue of healthcare is not treating people once they're sick, it's preventing people from getting sick. The amount of investment you put into preventative care, that is the key to a healthy population. Lilia and I, we started a mutual aid project of our own in New Brunswick, and we were amazed at how quickly it spread. You cannot depend on the existing institutions to solve your problems. You have to organize. You have to organize yourselves and come up with creative solutions that address the immediate problems that you face. And the Young Lords, we were always into what we used to call the serve the people programs. You have to show people you are genuinely concerned about their immediate problems and that you will work together with them to solve their immediate problems. And that way you stay in touch with the actual concerns that people have, rather than speculate or theorize about what their problems are. I would say I'm not optimistic as to the long-term results of the current upsurge. Because I mean, you must wonder, why are 35 to 40% of people in this country still completely supporting Donald Trump? And I do not believe that it's just because, you know, they don't understand. I'm afraid that they do understand. They understand exactly what he represents. So, you know, it's not as simple as, well, many more people are out there in the streets and it's a much more interracial crowd and more people are understanding racism. Yeah, that's true. But what's happening on the other side?
Wow, what's happening on the other side, indeed. I'm afraid they do understand. Really well done, Anthony. It's a real call to action, as well as a fascinating character. So, on to Tish Durkin. Her piece is called Glass Half Full, another new piece for us.
So it's Joe Breen is 30 years old. He's a very confident, very muscular, and very dark-skinned Black man. In any cohort, he could easily be voted most likely to be arrested for no reason. Last night I thought about it and I was just like, how would my dad find out if I was killed by the police? That really bothered me. I have my own health insurance. Any hospital that I go to, I'm going to be signing in as a new patient or I'm going to be an unconscious person. My dad in my phone is not listed as dad, so it's just like, I could die. And like, if it's not caught on camera, it doesn't even count anymore. Unless I have like an allergic reaction or, you know, congestive heart failure and die from that. If there's any sense of malfeasance in my death. Because now we see that the police are lying. The initial response for the George Floyd death, murder, was that he resisted arrest and he appeared to be suffering health-wise and then died later at the hospital. That's not true. It's a lie. Cops being overly aggressive, police brutality, we know it's a thing. Wow. This man smugly stole the life of a man while he's being pleaded with by the person that he is killing in front of other people. That smugness broke the world. I like to think that I'm a glass half full type of person, but I'm afraid that this might be the start of a war. This has now happened, what, 4 more times since George Floyd? So are these the first casualties of this war where the identity of America is being questioned? My real fear is that this could cause an issue in the union because people want to see President Trump elected again. And then there's a large swath of the country that sees President Trump as, you know, the definition of the history that we tried to bury, saying that, oh no, racism doesn't exist anymore. That's what it feels like Trump is. So if Trump loses, could there be civil war? Potentially. If he wins, potentially. I'm hard-pressed to see military might being used in this civil war, but there are a lot of Trump supporters who are very well armed, and they've spent years stockpiling. You see it on the internet. You see it on social media, how people are practicing. Like for what? You're not in a militia, and if you are, against what? What is your militia preparing for? Now, I don't like guns, even like my nephews when they were children, and you know, I didn't let them do that. No, you can't play like that with me. Guns are dangerous, not a toy. I'm overwhelmingly urged to buy a gun. Black Wall Street was only 100 years ago, and people got really upset that they thought that blacks were doing better than them, and they went around and killed the city, the Tulsa Massacre. I am not 100% confident that I would not be part of some retribution because somebody felt that some blacks and some other brown people are getting a little too uppity and they want to balance it out. It's almost like a holy war for them. What would happen if this country does fail? Like truly. It doesn't feel too far off of what reasonably could happen given how unreasonable 2020 has been so far. If this country is no longer the United States of America, who's going to protect me? Who? You know what? Life's random. I could be slain.
Thank you very much. That is, I just need a second to let that settle. That was beautiful work. Very, very brave. Good work, Tish. Thank you. Next up, Neil. Neil O'Brien is going to read a piece called Masks.
A woman in her early 40s, at home on a Sunday evening in June 2020. Her matter-of-fact delivery masks that she is at once both anxious and strong. I don't like all the uncertainty. I don't like not being able to plan. I mean, I'm naturally an anxious person, as I think you know, and it makes me feel even more anxious. It's hard to live your life when you can't plan things, when you don't know what things are going to be like. I can recall another period of time in my life ever where it's been like this. And I also I've never been afraid of people. I'm very social, but I don't want to be around anybody. And I feel resentful of people that, gather together and don't social distance and don't wear masks. It makes me angry. It makes me feel like they're being disrespectful and cavalier about it. I don't know. I feel really resentful over that, which I don't like feeling that way. So it's just a bunch of gross feelings, really. Like you're cooped up in the house most of the time. You have fear anytime you go out. You don't want to be around people. It's like everything that's against your most normal human instincts, or human nature. But you want to protect your own life, your own mortality, that's human nature too. Anyway. But it's tough not to be able to, what are you doing for Christmas this year? I don't know, you can't plan vacations. You don't know if people are going back to school, going back to work. And then you go back, it's not like everything's going to return to normal. There's going to be some sort of weird new normal. And we've never ever been through anything like this before. And generally, the human experience, you can look back and say, well, the last time something like this happened, this is what we did, or this is how we got through it, or this is how we handled it. But we don't have anything that we've ever been through like this before, or at least most people. I mean, when was the last time there was a worldwide pandemic, that people who are alive, we can still recall? I mean, we're all trying to figure it out, and we don't know anything about the disease, and that makes it worse. There's no vaccine. But I think people can only take, stuff like this for so long, and that's why I see people out, doing things and wanting to get back to normal, but you can't. It's like the virus is going to give you a break. Oh, I've terrorized you for 3 months, now I'm going to give you a break. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I think if I wasn't pregnant, there would be totally different answers to all of these questions. But I really don't see myself getting on an airplane until, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't even know if there is a vaccine. What if there's a vaccine in December and becomes widely available? I probably won't be able to get it because I'll be pregnant, hopefully, God willing. So yeah, I don't know. I come at it from a very different standpoint. I've gotten sick numerous times after flying, so I don't believe this nonsense that, there's air is recirculated, it's clean with HEPA filters. I don't think that's true. I think these airlines want people back. They want to make money, and so they're trying to make it seem like it's all safe. But I don't really buy into that, to be honest with you. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I know from personal experience I've flown and gotten sick numerous times in my life. And so I don't feel comfortable doing it, not while I'm pregnant. I feel like that's irresponsible of me to put myself in a situation that I know is dangerous while I'm pregnant is irresponsible. So that's why I don't feel comfortable doing a lot of things that probably most people feel more comfortable about doing. I don't even really want to go get my hair cut because I'm worried about that. I mean, I need a haircut. But I'm a lot more conservative, I think, than most people. But that's what makes me atypical, There's not a lot of people in the same position that are having to think about that. I have worries that are much more pressing. My worries are much more localized. I don't worry about having a baby during coronavirus. I worry about having a miscarriage. I mean, when you're an older woman, all you hear and are bombarded with, there's a reason that older women, it's harder to have babies because, all these things can go wrong. You don't even hear about I shouldn't say ever. It's rare to hear happy good news stories about women in their 40s having babies because it's jammed into your brain from a very young age that you really have no business having kids in your 40s because your eggs are all messed up. And that's why so many women have miscarriages. So that's what I worry about. because that's what seems more real to me right now. I mean, that's much more consuming than worrying about like getting COVID. I mean, I am worried about it, but I'm much more worried about having a miscarriage or having something be wrong with the baby. That's not to say that, you know, if everything goes okay and like I'm able to carry a healthy baby to term, which I hope is what will happen, that, you know, come January, if there's a second wave and like I'm going to the hospital and it's filled with COVID patients and I'm getting a C-section by myself because they're not allowing any visitors, then like, yeah, that's not going to be great. But as to the comfort of knowing that I've been through that before and I can do it. I know what to expect and I'm strong and I know that I can. If God forbid I have to be in an operating room getting a C-section by myself, it would be awful. But I've done that before, so I can do it. I just have to think that way, you know? I'm glad that I'm not pregnant for the first time going through something like this. I think that would be much harder if that were the case. I feel sad for women that are pregnant for the first time. They're having to go through it with these worries, you know, because at least I've done it before and I know what to expect and I know I can get through it by myself if I have to. I mean, I thought today about my parents and I don't know when I'm going to see them again. And, you know, normally my mom would come stay with us for like a month and she probably won't be able to. And like, that makes me sad. That's a really special time that like we're going to miss out on. Well, I mean, it depends on what's going on with the world. Again, we can't plan. So I don't know what's going to happen in January and February next year. I hope things will like be much better and like, you know, COVID will be in the rearview mirror, but what if it's not? So I don't know. But again, you can't plan, and I'm a planner. I like to be in control of things and plan for things. But you can't really do that with COVID. I think that's part of the reasons I bought so many masks. Just like that's the one thing you can do. Like we need masks, so I can find masks and make sure we have masks. 2 days later, she had a miscarriage.
So, thank you, Neil. Her anxiety came through so beautifully. And I'm so sad about her loss. Whew. Next up is Katherine Clifton with a piece called The Next Step.
Thanks, Emily. This is a 20-year-old male student. I've never had a problem with staying at home all day. Like this just gave me an extended holiday. Getting out of the house has always been an effort for me. There's this pressure to do good. Like as a refugee, I feel if I don't do good, it reflects that I need to do better and I need to think things through and be more focused. Like in my studies, I never really took one step at a time. I was always looking too far ahead that I never saw that the next step I was taking was not on land. Like there was no land. So like I've been thinking about not the next step, but just the next step I'm going to take. And when I forget to look down, like I get depressed. Like I went back and deleted all these social media apps. Everything was filled with George Floyd and I did not really know where the world was going. When I saw the scene of the protests in Minneapolis, when they were going towards the police station and it was set on fire and I saw that, it is scary. And what I believe is that we have to coexist with people who have different opinions. I truly believe that. We cannot make people believe what they don't want to believe. I cannot make people love refugees. I can give them I can tell them I can be open about being a refugee and give them facts because we're not really terrorists or bad people. We have more background checks than anybody in America. I can be vocal about it, but at the end of the day, that person is going to have their own opinion. And I always have this in the back of my head. Like when I go out and I speak, I find that I have this fear. Like I don't want to say something that might offend someone or make someone think differently about refugees because I said it. And I feel as a person, I don't really even know where I stand, like on the right or the left. But I think that America, it started with an idea of a place where people could be free and flourish. But early America did not have freedom for all. God did create all men equal, but then the men made other men work for them. So that corrupted the idea of the Constitution. And as somebody who just found out about the Constitution, someone who is still just learning about it, I also feel uncomfortable saying these words because I don't know if I'm saying it right or wrong. That's why I stay away from, like, I love politics and love debating about it, but I have this fear that if I do, I fear someone will get offended. Like, I think this is like so weird. The thing is, I feel a lot of things that the current administration does. As a person, I feel very uncomfortable about that. And I don't know if like a leader should behave, but I don't think a leader should behave like that. You're the first person I'm sharing my political opinions with outside my family because I feel like it's really messed up because I come from a country that is quite conservative. Even I feel like I still have prejudice. I still have anger towards them, the people over there. I still have anger because my people have been persecuted for so long. I still have relatives who I know are there, who I fear for their life, and someone might do something to them, or they might end up on the wrong side of an argument and they won't even get justice. I just need to focus on the next step.
That is lovely. Just need to focus on the next step, indeed. Ah, it's beautifully constructed. Thank you. And we're going to go on now to Rosemary Parrillo.
Thank
Her
you.
piece is called Lockdown.
Thank you. This is Ray, a 72-year-old man whose mother is in a nursing home. It had become a part of my routine for the past 4 years. Every other day, 4th floor, the Nemechi unit. My mom sitting in the same chair, same table, with the same 3 women, a little private pod of bewildered pals. And every time I'd arrive, she would say to anyone within earshot, "Do you know who this is? This is my son." "Oh, Anne, your son," the staff would answer, as if it were the first time. I'd always bring cookies or something sweet, which she loved. Mom could power through a sleeve of Lorna Doones like an 8-year-old. I didn't have to worry about things like diabetes because my mother's perfectly healthy, well, except, of course, for her mind, which is pretty much a goner. Some days were hard, days when she'd nod off or when she'd try to talk but couldn't find the words. There were times she'd hear things that weren't there or seem agitated by something she couldn't possibly explain. But then there were days I really enjoyed, like when she would get into activities, whacking a beach ball around a giant table with everyone trying to keep it going. Was your mom an athlete? No, never. Or when she'd start belting out south of the border down Mexico way, for no reason at all, that would just blow my mind because I never heard my mother sing anything ever. Visiting the home frequently wasn't something I felt I had to do. It was something I wanted to do. It just made me feel better knowing she was okay. Then on March 12th, as I was walking up to the entrance, I ran into a caregiver I knew who said, "Oh, they're not letting anyone in anymore." Really? The sign on the door confirmed it. No visitors permitted due to coronavirus. The facility was on lockdown, and I haven't seen my mother since then. It's now June, and I have no idea when I will be allowed to visit or even how we'll be able to return. Here I am, a 72-year-old man, and this is the longest I've ever gone without seeing my mother. I grew up an only child in a home with just my mom and grandmother. My father walked out when I was 10, though he never really acted like a father when he was there anyway. Never showed me any interest, never tried to have a relationship of any kind. So really, I always felt like I was raised by a single mom, even though she eventually remarried. A nice guy, but he was more like a friend than a parent. Maybe that's why I've always felt so protective of her. but more so now that she's old and extremely vulnerable. I have to admit, this shutdown has been really tough. At first, it didn't quite sink in that it was going to go on for so long. I thought they'd be closed for a few weeks, maybe a month, but now I have no idea when I'm going to see her again, or if I'm going to see her again. I was hoping to have a little celebration for her 90th birthday on April 1st, but I only got to see her on FaceTime. She had no idea what was going on. Mother's Day came and went. That was hard too. I try not to get depressed, but it weighs on me every single day. I think she can't see well, she can't hear well. What is she doing all day? What's going on through her mind? The good news is that she has great caregivers at the home. They call me with updates. They use their own cell phones for FaceTime. But she doesn't have the capacity to understand that I'm on the other end of the call. Thing is, COVID-19 is still here. 35,000 people in nursing homes across the country already have died. My biggest fear remains that my mother still might contract the virus. And if she doesn't, my next biggest fear is that when I finally do get to see her again, she won't remember who I am.
Well, I'm crying again. I cried the first time. So I think we're going to move right along, Rosemary. It's a beautiful piece, and I know so many people are going through that. So moving on to Callie Considine with a piece called Bounce Back.
A woman, 83, sits in her favorite armchair. Sunlight streams in through a partition in the curtains, striking the woman's arms. Her transparent skin glows like the halo around a full moon. She makes herself comfortable, then turns her attention to us. We are noticeably distanced from her. I see some futility in my future. I'm not like somebody in their 40s or 50s that says in 10 years. Like the Spanish flu, 10 years later, they were doing the Charleston and dressed in their flapper dresses. And that might be true here too. Everything's gonna bounce back, but probably not in my lifespan. So I see like planning for the future is like planning maybe for next week. I used to plan trips and travel and I like to plan. That's part of me, like looking forward to something and planning. So that's kind of like, well, I can't plan that far ahead. In some aspects, I'm luckier than the years when I was traveling, because walking with a cane is a problem I have with mobility. I crossed traveling off my list a couple years ago. But I have missed my classes. I live in a congregate building and I miss some of the activities here. I miss the parties, just the socialization. You could step outside your door anytime and talk to somebody, and now that's gone. I feel like that lifestyle is gone and is replaced by a screen, which is better than not seeing these people at all. I'm staying connected. We do the chat group online through the senior center. I really miss what I had, and it might not return in my lifetime, I don't know. My doctor tells me that seniors need to isolate for 2 years if there's no vaccine. So that's how it's affecting me. But we've gotten through a lot. I've seen a lot of crisis throughout my years. I remember Pearl Harbor, I was 4 years old. I remember snippets of World War II, the ration books, no elastic in my underwear, and no bubble gum. All the Cold War things, racial unrest in the 60s. I mean, I've seen a lot of chaos. And this probably, it tops it all. I mean, I don't think it's ever, this is as bad as it gets. This hasn't happened in 100 years, a pandemic. This encompasses the whole world, the health, the economy, the leadership. This is different. This has made our lives very, very global. And then looking at the planet floating out there, I think in a way, just the way the planet is saying, I've had enough air pollution and abuse. I have to do something. Cutting down on the population might help. There's less cars driven now, less of everything. So I don't know if there's a bigger picture, and I don't know if it's comforting. We are just a little parcel of this, and our own importance is not. Even though our little corner of the world is what keeps us going, realizing that there's something else is comforting in a way. She places her hands in her lap, looking out the window through the partition in the curtains, and the corners of her lips curl upward.
Well done, Callie. Thank you. Love the detail in that piece. The flapper after 1918. Yeah, indeed. Well done. So, beautifully read. We're going to move on to Jill Hackett, and her piece is called Just So Wrong.
Mother and grandmother, age 73. She has been at the time of the interview in quarantine alone since mid-March for 14 weeks. She was followed for COVID symptoms for 5 of those weeks during the peak of the first wave in New Jersey. She is a writer, Caucasian. In the third act of life, you know death is coming. He's on the playbill, but you can keep him in the corner of your eye usually. Now with COVID, he's at the table, front and center. You don't have to feed him, but you can't get him out of view. When I was sick, I bought an iWatch to keep me company, something that could take my pulse, check my EKG, and phone for help if I needed it. Software from the hospital texted me twice a day to see if I was okay. Took my mind off of death a little. I attended a funeral in Kitchener, Ontario on my iPad. She was 77, 4 years older than me. Watching the funeral alone, my tears came hard from my belly. I was drenched. I wept for Lois. I wept for me. I wept for all of us. Her life was simple, and she left such a hole in her family's lives. Her son talked about how his mom dedicated her whole life to connecting people. Only her family and the minister were in the church with her coffin. They pulled up their black masks and walked out together. She died in the hospital. She didn't die alone. Then came George Floyd, and I realized there was something much, much worse than dying alone. I wept for him, and I wept for all of us. Just so wrong. Had to get my prescription in Hillsborough drive-through pharmacy. On 209, there were maybe 300 demonstrators along the road, both sides holding signs. Peaceful. Mostly young, high school and college, a few parents. I really wanted to join them, but I can't. I'm high risk. I opened up my sunroof and I stuck my fist up. And immediately, my whole body felt it. They saw me. We connected. And I wept.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you, Jill. Well done. Ooh, Susan Sandor is up next with a piece called Joined at the Hip.
Samantha is a 68-year-old disciplined planner and David's wife. I have a new title attached to my name, caregiver. No diploma earned or training required, just love. My husband has a rare cancer, Merkel cell carcinoma, and has undergone 2 surgeries, chemo, radiation, and now immunotherapy. That's what he's combating, and so far, surviving. Besides being immunocompromised, he is a classic case of comorbidity. So I asked him to take a shot at writing his obit. With the coronavirus lurking, I think, well, anyway, he refuses. Not adamantly, but he just won't do it. I wrote my own obituary a few years ago. God only knows who will bite the dust first. But I asked him, how can I write about your escaping the Nazis with your family? How can I write about your losing so many family members that you still mourn? How can I write about your mother and father fleeing first from Germany, then from Holland with you and your 2 younger brothers? How can I write about your family immigrating to this country with little to nothing when they once lived a life of privilege that they themselves earned? How can I write about your becoming an American citizen and being sent back to Germany to fight in World War II? How can you expect me to document any of this and your life that followed? So these are my problems, my concerns, that I can't pay proper tribute if David is the first to go, that friends and all who met this man of mine will not know his whole story. I've thoughts about being unable to be with him for treatments and doctor's visits because of COVID. You know, no visitors allowed. Way early when we first met 37 years ago, friends used to joke that we were joined at the hip. That hasn't changed. I need to be there, holding his hand, soothing his mind, sharing his pain. So the other thing is, he's driving me crazy about going into public places. He used to do the grocery shopping and errands. He misses it, and I get that, you know, the camaraderie and all. Early April, in a real shitstorm, I ventured out to the supermarket for the first time during senior hour. It was traumatic. The young man working behind the fish counter had a mask, but didn't cover his nose. Should I say something? Well, I did. I just did, rather nicely, but firmly. It was my first encounter of this sort. People can be crazy. Suppose he pulled a gun, or maybe threw a fish in my face. I wore a mask and a hat with clear plastic face shield and latex gloves. I was so hot. My glasses were fogged. I was hyperventilating and thought I'd pass out. I have COPD, so I know what it's like not to be able to breathe. But this was worse, more than I can describe. Most people were wearing masks, expressions unable to be seen, voices barely audible. Totally surreal. Trip ended with the downpour soaking the paper bags in the shopping cart, which tore open while getting them into the car. Groceries were strewn, some rolled under the car. I failed. This used to be David's gig. Anyway, my man's a great cook and he needs what he needs to make great meals. I can follow a list, you know, and things are not quite like the first time I shopped with this plague plaguing us. Humans adapt. It's what we're supposed to do, right? And we do it. Evolution. But every day it's, can I go to the bakery? Can I go to the supermarket? Can I go to the hardware store? Can I go to the post office? My answer is always the same. No, 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 and no. He tells me he feels like a bird in a cage. Why does he feel the need to go to the bakery for rolls? The freezer is stuffed with all sorts of breads. Rye, brioche, baguette, multigrain. His answer? I don't like multigrain. That's your bread. and I want a fresh roll. Kills me. He deserves a damn fresh roll from the bakery, but I'm not going to the bakery either. When I tell him we have to accept life differently, have to compromise, he says he's had enough sacrifice in his life. He certainly has. You can't imagine what he's lived through. What I'm telling you here is just the tip of the iceberg. So I feel like I'm denying him. I feel torn. He hasn't been anywhere except to doctors and hospitals since isolation. But after battling cancer for 1.5 years and kind of winning, sort of winning, well, there are deficits, if you can imagine. I don't want to bring a goddamn virus to kill him or me. Jesus Christ, this is ludicrous. Can we get used to this and think it's normal? The end.
All right. I love that. I mean, I know there's a lot of misery in it, but it makes me laugh so hard. I love it. We're all going through our own version of failing to be able to buy groceries. It's so great. Okay. And I love the history in that, Susan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My goodness, we're coming to our last piece. We are really, everyone really did keep to their time. That's great for the most part. Donna Clovis is next up with Silence is Suffocation.
And this is my sister, Michelle. She's 38 years old, African-American, and she's a nurse in a large corporation dealing with coronavirus healthcare. You were right. I don't know how you do it, but you were right. I know because you're my older sister. You know, you just know. There's a reason for the silence. Silence is a suffocation. It just stifles my voice. And you're right. It always happens to me, always. Every time I try to speak. And when I take the chance to stand up, Black Lives Matter. And I try to do what's right, but I get shut down. I can't breathe. And then I suffocate. You know, this time I wrote a letter. It was a good letter, I thought, and I wrote it to all my employees. Listen to me. I want to read it to you. It's about George Floyd, equal rights, the virus. Dear staff, I am sure we're all following recent events in the news regarding the senseless death of George Floyd and the resulting in prison reactions across the nation. It is a good time to remind our employees that the values of our corporate community include respect and diversity. We are committed to these values, and we will always promote equal opportunity in all of our employment decisions. We will never tolerate mistreatment of anyone on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic. Our company is proud of its diverse employee population and how our different backgrounds, perspectives, opinions, and experiences contribute to our overall strength and success. We are better as an organization because our culture is open and inclusive, and that will not change. Last, we should all endeavor in our personal and professional lives to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. Thank you. I thought it was good. What do you think? Good, right? Stand up for Floyd, stand up for justice, for freedom, our equal rights, our diversity, our health company. Yes, our division in charge of CDC regulations for coronavirus. And then you know what happens? The top CEO changes a letter. Floyd got erased. No equality stuff, no diversity stuff. Every word was just changed to generics. You know it's all BS. I don't know anymore. Ugh. How do you think we can make this hate obey? And you know, they wouldn't have said anything anyway if I didn't bring it up. Just the silence. That's how they handle everything, in silence. Not a darn breathing word. They are the virus taking away my breath. Ha, a healthcare agency in charge of corona? Figure that. Do you believe that? I'm so angry. I'm just so angry. Because they call me nigger, you know. I must be. Because that's the way they make me feel. And I think this racism and the coronavirus, they march together. They march together with us in a protest. It's like a horror flick in the darkness of a Black Death, creeping as I feel the fright coming over myself every time my office mates look at me to quiet down. And you know, they've been talking about you. You just know. I feel like choking again. It's all the anxiety. And then the panic. It grips the back of my throat and the pressure on my chest. Ugh. I suffocate when I can't find my voice. You know, it's tough. It's just so, so tough. Life's tough in the silence. And you know this is true when they don't even notice.
Donna, I love this piece. Thank you so much. I suffocate when I can't find my voice. Oh, yes. I want to take just a short break because then I just want to let everyone take just about some breaths here. And there was a lot to take in here. Some of the things I want to talk about when we get back is, and something that might be interesting to both the auditors and the audience, for those who don't know, that with documentary theater, you have the raw material that you keep on working and distilling until you get to a well-formed monologue, and then an actor takes it on. So what we're hearing now is process of the writing of it, all right? And the structure of it. When we get back, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about hearing all of these together. And since what I am hoping is that they give a kind of portrait in time of what we're going through at this moment in time as Americans, I find that you have given us such a wonderful variety of characters and people and themes and concerns. And so many of them are surprising. Others are so recognizable, which of course is gold in the theater. So let's just take a moment to think through our colleagues' work and hearing all of us together, and we'll come back and discuss it. For those of you who are in the chat room, I'm not sure whether our audiences can ask questions or only our auditors, but certainly if you have the chat function, we want to hear from you as well. All right, have a good 5-minute break and we'll be back. So let me start let's get into full gallery view. You don't need to spotlight me. I want to see everyone. Yes, everyone's there. Great. So I'd love to hear from the class. Some of those were new. If you hadn't, I got to read them ahead of time, the new ones, but I hadn't heard them. And some of you had neither, right? So I know it's an interesting situation when you hear something for the first time and then you're hearing other things for the second time. But as a whole, what is your takeaway from what we have done as a class? Any thoughts about hearing it all in one gulp as opposed to one at a time and discussing each one at length? Any thoughts?
For me, it's very interesting. I felt human suffering.
Yeah.
I felt human suffering. And I never imagined that, even in our own class. But hearing it all at once, I felt the pain of human suffering.
I hear you. So did I. Yeah.
You know, Donna, I totally agree. I felt human suffering, but I also had this sense of hope, you know, about the possibilities for change in the world. And I think that's what theater can often bring, and art in general can often bring to a situation, is the complexity and the vulnerability and the suffering, as well as by imagining how others experience the world, you know, the possibility of common humanity. And I think that all of our pieces, because they were so localized in this moment, really did speak to one another. And there were beautiful parallels hearing them back to back that I hadn't heard before.
Can you give an example of one? Because I had that feeling too.
The notion of both needing space and also kind of like the parallels of being isolated for different reasons, both for COVID, also suffocation, the idea of being just kind of trapped right now. I think that's one that almost everyone in some way kind of touched upon.
Agreed. Also a lot of fear. Hope and fear. In your
anxiety.
The anxiety, Katherine, with your subject, terrified he's going to say the wrong thing, terrified, you know. So you just captured a refugee's problems, and of course there was Lorna's piece also, where there was just a sense of, I don't understand what the problem is here, since I came from something else, and then having children and having to deal with what it is to be an American and a Black American, or the mother of Black Americans. I mean, I've just found there were echoes through so many of your pieces together that I found to be fascinating. But I did also, along with the suffering, feel that with, you know, pain is change and change is pain, that there was a sense of common humanity, which was the hope, which I think that's beautifully captured what you're talking about, Katherine. Yeah, Tish.
And I was also struck by, even though it was just incidental and it was sort of not the top note of what we were looking at, how many of them had a thread of what the subject thought America is or is supposed to be, yes, and how they're disappointed by it or surprised by it or bitter about its failure to live up to itself, and how that it's like a personal affront to a lot of the people, even if they're not kind of expostulating on that in the conversation.
Yes, and yes.
What I thought was great about this project was it was a way to drop into people's interior lives, and you know, journalistically, looking at it journalistically, it's kind of what we're not seeing in journalism right now, because we're all obsessed with the process of government and looking at kind of the big picture. And this allows us to look inside people's lives into the, you know, the small picture of what people are dealing with.
And you know, you've just about given the definition of what documentary theater can do. And that's something that journalism cannot do. And in fact, invented work sometimes can, but often can't quite get to, right? And so there are so many journalists in this class, which is so interesting to me. You know, that you're so clearly understand the difference. But a lot of the same skill set is useful in making this work. But just like in, you know, if you look at the Shakespeare plays and you look at the soliloquies, those are often direct addressed to the audience. It's not internal, oh, what am I thinking to be or not to be? It's like, to be or not to be. What should I do? Should I live or should I die? The deepest concerns of a character come out in the soliloquies, and it's shared with the audience. You have the same thing in musical theater. The song should just go so deep inside that you can't possibly have expressed this except in song. That's where the greatest songs come from, right? And what happens in music theater. So monologues like this have that same kernel of just undeniable truth that sometimes you can't even get within a documentary scene, but you can get it in a monologue. And you've done that so across the board, which is phenomenal. Yeah.
Emily, it reminded me a little bit of Our Town, but instead of being in a cemetery, I would somehow have the stage represent America at a standstill, holding its breath.
Huh. Oh, what a beautiful thought. We were just talking about this in artistic staff today, where we're talking about our town, and I said, what we've done feels to me like our town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not at all the way the structure of Thornton Wilder's brilliant play, but you know what I'm saying.
There somehow is an echo, but instead of, what's different here is we're not standing in death. We're standing in possibility,
Yes.
and holding our breath. Breath is an issue here.
Breath is an issue. And interestingly enough, in that everyone was saying, so many people are questioning about, what America is and how it does it live up to or does not live up to its ideal and wants in its own self-image, or wants to be of its own self-image. These pieces, in a way, say what America is, the best of us. Do you know? Because it is so diverse. Whether you came here because you're the ancestors of people who were forced to come, whether you came here out of choice, whether you came here fleeing something else, as so many did, if you were going through facing your own death, but then you have, that incredible sensation of understanding what happened to George Floyd, that there's a worse way for someone to die than a friend. I mean, all of these incredible echoes are quite profound and beautiful, and only come when you're talking at this deep a level with another human being, that things come out that are really hard to invent, I have found.
Yeah, and just to underline, one of our auditors, our regular auditors, Jarrell Henderson, put in our chat that the performance reminded him of an American word quilt, which I think pairs well with your.
Beautiful American word.
Yeah, and I'd also love to highlight, we have so many great responses going in our Zoom chat, but I also want to highlight what one of our other longtime auditors.
It's a range of experience and character. Yeah, yeah.
Claudia says, when I heard them all together, I saw a black stage with spotlights, each spotlight one story of suffering, hope, love, pain, compassion. I think that was a beautiful sentiment as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about, Susan?
I just feel that each play, each monologue basically said that we have no control, not over our own personal lives and the rest of the world, or America and the rest of the world. I think each piece brought that out too, that we're just kind of floating in midair, not knowing if we're ever going to land. And if we do land, are we going to crash land?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say that Neil's piece exemplified that. Oh, I'm so sorry, Neil. So sorry. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of shared humanity, though. I mean, I was wondering if, I don't know if this happened to you listening to it, but how much we all share, no matter the age, the background, the race, the personal history. I mean, the shared humanity came through and so beautifully. Now, if you were to talk about the other, some of you wrote more than one piece. And the ones that I read, they were also beautiful. So I'm hoping that you will continue the work without the class, and that you might have found something for yourselves. I mean, when I think about the amount of work you did in 4 weeks is quite extraordinary. And what you all did together is so extraordinary. I mean, it's a wonderful group here. And I'm wondering if any of you are interested in doing more work like this, and whether you would be interested as you start to work. Do you have any way to contact? I mean, a lot of you read beautifully, but to give it to an actor could be a very interesting next step for you, to hear it, to further refine, edit, tweak the work. Do you have access to actors in your life? Has anyone? No actors? Yeah, I know that you do, Callie. Is it a diverse age range, or is it mainly younger people, or?
My pool primarily consists of people within my age range. I have maybe a dozen actors over the age of 35 that I could access. For my piece, though, specifically, I don't have any elderly female actors on my list. I have all female actors, but that's not what I'm looking for.
That's not unusual. Often people have retired at 83. Yeah, but not always, not always. Anyway, if you were to go forward, I had some thoughts about craft, and I have some thoughts about how to refine the work further. And some of you don't need to refine the work further. You might as well just do more, you know? And then if you are interested in going beyond the monologue form and into making, say, you could start with a one-act documentary piece, you know, that you could build out of all your own work, or you could take, if you stayed together as a group or you made your own group, that you could make like what we did today with one actor or with many actors. Now, Anna Devere Smith made a whole career out of taking monologues that she herself made and then acting them and transforming herself into all these different people. So if you're interested in looking at that, there are two pieces, and both I think can be found on PBS, and maybe Corey can help. I'm not great on the internet, but one is called Fires in the Mirror, and it's about an event that took place in the 80s, I think, in Williamsburg, between Hasidic Jews and Black community there. She plays all the roles. There's another piece called Twilight Los Angeles, which I think we talked about, and that's the one I worked on. And that was the Rodney King event, was the galvanizing event of the play, and she went through so many communities to discuss that with a lot of people, which is kind of what we did here, right? We've made a little 1 hour play here. I mean, I would reorder it a little, and we could edit a little, and we could add and subtract things to it. But that's what, believe it or not, we've made. And it's because each one of you worked so diligently and went so deep with each one of your characters. In fact, we could have a full length if we just used the others of the ones you chose not to read. Anthony's first piece, Donna has a second, almost everyone has a second piece. And they were beautiful too. And we would rearrange and reorder. But you find also a way to make an arc with that. I felt that I threw it up in the air a little bit because I didn't even have a total sense of what each one was going to, how each one was going to land. And that's part of the process. You learn as you listen, oh, that's a little bit too much like the one before it, so we want more of a contrast here. And, so the ordering of it is also important. So this was the first draft of ordering it, and I would do a second and maybe a third, and you don't really know till you do it. I mean, much of my work with Anna was not about the performance of it, it was about the ordering of it. And I basically was with her ordering it in the first the premiere in LA. So it's a very exciting process to do it, and I just hope you do, because each one of you has the talent for it, has the instinct for it. I mean, it's really blowing my mind. I used to think I was so special, and I don't feel so special anymore. You guys are amazing. So I just wanted to find out if you had any questions about what next steps would be. Donna, I didn't
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, I was going to say next steps. I'm curious. I'd love to do more. I mean, I really enjoyed listening to everyone and getting feedback from you, getting feedback from my peers, hearing their reactions. But going forward, I'd like to do more. I would love to see everything put together in a production. I would love, oh my goodness, to be part of that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're really close to being able to do that with just the classwork. I mean, that's why I'm so blown away. I mean, I didn't expect that, but you are. So I'm off to do my own work as of 6:30 tonight. So I don't know that I am the one to do it with you, but if you got a director, and either, you know, actors or however you want to do it. I mean, you could do it as writers. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go. And also, believe it or not, Zoom is now our friend for this kind of work.
Yeah.
We did a community reading of my play Execution of Justice. And it was extraordinary because a lot of it is, you know, it's talking heads. And it holds. Monologues hold on Zoom. And you can do it, you know, in terms of gallery, you can do it in terms of doing your own backdrops or not. Again, that would be a director's choice, but you know, you can use this platform for this kind of work. So you don't have to wait till theaters reopen. You know what I'm saying? You can keep working and keep sharing the work. And quite frankly, it's reminding me of the WPA project. You know, that when people went out and started interviewing people all over the country and gathering the work of people who were not being heard from after the Depression, where a lot of beautiful work got done. Some of it was the beginning of, you know, living newspaper and getting it on to the stage. But this work, I think, would be an incredible service to capture this moment, and from all different areas of the society and the country. And something that they couldn't do in the 30s is you can get to somebody in Alaska, or you can get to someone, you know, on the Navajo reservation and ask them what's going on with them. And a lot of you are journalists, so you know how to do that. You can go outside of your own family and people you know, and go either farther afield or keep it very tight and close with your closest friends and family. I've just started interviewing my sister. Like Donna, just like, what are you really thinking? And I'm chipping away. I'm getting there. I mean, she's blowing my mind, actually. So I really encourage you to go forward. Whether you all stay together or whether you're doing it on your own, you each have so much, you know, to offer on this. Now I hear you're going to keep in touch. I hear that some people want to have everyone's emails, right? And I think that's wonderful. Oh, we've got maybe reach out to Passage Theater in Trenton. Yeah, Ryan. Yeah. And will I be doing another workshop like this? You know, I had said no, but I'm thinking,
Yay!
yeah, I think we should have another conversation once I figure out my new life. I started a new life in half an hour, 28 minutes to be exact. And so we'll find out, but I've been mainly writing and creating works, so.
Emily, I think the only thing that you were wrong about in this class is that thing you said about not being special. Like, I feel incredibly honored to have been in this class with you, and to have you, you know, in like minutes from your exit, with the curtains, it was a very impactful, moving course, and you are one special, amazing teacher.
Oh my, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a sheer pleasure. And I have to tell you that, as I said at the beginning of this class, I cannot imagine a better way to end my 30 years. It just makes so much sense to be with all of you and doing this work at this moment in time with such talented and deep people. I mean, it's just great. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. It's our privilege, really. We're privileged to be with you.
Emily, I say thank you for bringing us all together. This is something completely new for me. I'm not a writer. I write
Oh,
in
yeah? Oh, yeah?
You are.
But you know, the friend that I wrote about today, who lived through the genocide, I've actually been to Rwanda with her and met family who lived through the genocide. And for me, this has been about the human spirit. Just been amazing that so many people have shared. You know, you sit at home and you're watching the news and you talk to people from time to time and you hear them expressing themselves, but to collectively hear all these different voices talking about their experiences, and some of you spoke about very personal things. Thank you so much for, you know, trusting us to share such personal stories. And I'm leaving this just so incredibly blessed experience. And again, Emily, I mean, you brought us together, and Corey, again, thank you, you know, for your lovely emails and just the coordination. For what we're going through right now, this class has just been just a tremendous blessing. And thank you for that. And thank you for the comments on the site as well.
Well, my honor, I'm telling you. And I think that I want to be on that email list, Corey, so that we can, you know, once this settles down and I settle down, we can think about this. I think that we might have something that matters that we might want to offer to people. Yeah. And we'll get even more rigorous and still have a great time. Okay. So let me figure out who I am in a little time and do this. What the next step is. Donna, I love this. Yeah. Okay. So can the auditors be on the email list? Okay, wait a minute. Oh my God, what am I getting myself into, right? Just when I said I'm just gonna concentrate. We'll see what comes to pass. And let's just cherish this time that we have had together. Any other craft questions or thoughts? Things that you came up against that you wished you could have some guidance through, or what the next step might be in any of the pieces that you've done?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So in writing this kind of monologue,
Yeah.
what is the ideal running time, if you will?
Well, I think it's this, it depends completely on the piece. My husband is fond of saying this. He said sometime, he saw Nicholas Nickleby. Most of you are too young to even know what that was, but it was the first time there was like a 7-hour long play. And he couldn't believe that it went by in a flash. And people thought he was crazy to go and, go to that 7 hours. And then I remember he said he has been at plays that are an hour and 20 minutes. And he just saying, when is this going to end? So what Edward Albee always said is a play should be as long as it's supposed to be. And it's a rather profound statement because sometimes a piece that's a minute and a half can blow your mind and give you the biggest gut punch you've ever had. And then there can be a monologue that's 7 or 8 minutes and which you think is rather long for a monologue, and it completely holds, right? So it really is think of theater as time. It is going from moment to 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 moment, and you cannot waste a moment. That is, if you have a dead spot or something that isn't landing or is repetitive or is, feels like a sag, suddenly your piece becomes very long. So often less is more, but as I say, it doesn't mean, it has to be a minute and a half or 3 minutes. It's that it needs to be as long as it needs to be. And sometimes if you're a good journalist, you start to cut things to make it cleaner or clearer, and that's not necessarily what makes it more dramatic or makes it more compelling. So you say, that's a detail that's repeated. Well, sometimes a repeated detail in a speech means that there's an obsession of some kind, or there's a lie, or there's something someone's struggling with. So you don't necessarily want to use your well-honed journalistic skills. You want to find out where the core of the emotion is, or where the humor is, or where the pain is, or in that stutter moment or in that repeated moment, it breaks up the rhythm and suddenly we're going, what's that about? Right? It's the surprise. Mm-hmm. But theater is time. It is. And time is very elastic in the theater. So for example, a minute is an endless amount of time in the theater. And you know that when you're trying to do transitions from one scene into the next. And if it's a play that needs to dovetail, Shakespeare was the master at this. He always had entrance lines and exit lines so that things could overlap, so that there was never a wait. And then I'm working on a musical right now. The transitions are golden, and you're looking at how you can develop musically from one scene into the next. And though sometimes you want to take anywhere from 25 seconds to 2.5 minutes. And it all depends on what needs to be expressed. Right? And you should never be aware of time in the theater. If you're aware of anytime you see in previews someone looking at their watch, some people don't have watches anymore, I realize, but they shift in their seat. So they start to get a little utsy, or there's a cough or two. Then you go, And if you see that twice in a row, and we saw it one night, and then you at again the next night, you hear the same thing. You listen to the audience. They tell you when you're not holding it. Mm. That's why especially when you're working on documentary work, which breaks so many rules, often you want to develop it in front of an audience. And next time we read all of this, all the mutes are off, so you can hear the responses, okay? Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
I have a question, Emily. I have an interest in pursuing my piece further, and I'm wondering, as a director, where is the line in documentary theater between staying true to the raw material and taking a little bit of artistic liberty?
For me, I draw the line. I mean, I shape. I have to admit, I shape a lot. And if you look at my play Still Life, for example, I put it in the broken form. And I don't know if you have the DPS copy or the TCG copy, but in the TCG copy, you'll see the lines that are separated, and that helped me distill and find the rhythms. The only place I draw the line is ethically. Never, ever change the intent of what your subject was trying to say, so that you're not trying to make it yours or what you wish they meant, because that's what you believe, but that you keep true to what their intention was, of what they meant to say. So even if you change a word, and you can do that to make it clearer and give it more punch, it is not for you to change the meaning. And I've seen people cross the line on that, and I'm very much against it. I mean, there's many rules about ethics in documentary theater as there are in journalism, and or should be. A lot of people, right, skirt around the edges or go even further. And I'm also, you know what, it makes for less good art. And less good journalism, but less good art.
Emily, has anybody ever asked for compensation because they are
The subject?
basically
Yes.
giving you their life, you know, telling you about their life, or, and how do you handle that?
In my first two plays, Anula, an autobiography, which was an oral history-based piece on Holocaust survivor. She wanted to you know, we split it 50-50. When I did Still Life, he asked for, I think it was 15 or 20%, and whatever he wanted, I gave him. His wife didn't want anything, and his girlfriend didn't want anything. Gloria and I are 50-50. Steinem and I are 50-50, but a lot of that is also because she gave me not only her life personally through interviews, but also all that she wrote, that she said I was able to take from anything. And I think that's absolutely fair. And it's also quite an honor to share the copyright 50-50 with Gloria Steinem. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, you need to work. You need to work that out. But on many of my other pieces, no, it's individual. But I usually bow to the subject because it's their life and often their words. And yes, I'm bringing my skills and artistry to it, but if they want that, then I give it. Not everyone does, but I do. You do, as I told you, have to get permission to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And always in that permission, ask if they want to be anonymous or if they want their names used. Yeah.
Do you have a standard form that you use for something like that, or
I just write it up
just
each.
an email, or just?
Yeah, I mean, I usually write it up each time, or when I'm on it now, if it's an audio recording, I ask them to agree up front before I take the interview and it's on and it's recorded. Or do you agree that, you know, your words can be used in a play, and would you like to be anonymous? Or would you like your name used?
Mhm.
Or do you care? And then they answer. You can have that in a recording. Yeah. It's very cool.
Emily, is there a way that people can listen to our monologues? I have some students that want to maybe listen. I don't know if we have a link or that they can actually go back to and listen.
Yes. Corey, can you help?
Yeah. So currently, our plan is to make the video recording of this available on our website at some point in the near future. So I will definitely keep you guys in the loop once we know when that's going to happen. So keep an eye out on it. It'll also probably be featured in our McCarter HOME email blast. So that'll be another good way to keep track of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Do you have, does everyone, do you all want to share your work with each other? Because you could do a Dropbox or something like that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's also something that I wanted to say about, you know, craft work right now, that I think some of the pieces hold just the way they are, and some of them could have a little editing, shaping, distilling, you know, just, you know, how do you make Peking, you know, when you hang it upside down and the fat drips off? I mean, there's a little fat in some of things. You can let it drip off. And also, some of you have done beautiful first lines, last lines, and sometimes the pieces seem to end more than once. And you do want to have, you do want to end it. Sometimes just the simple raw truth, as we had with Neil, is devastating. You know, just simple. And you can play around with it. Sometimes you don't know until you hear it with an audience what's going to be the strongest end. Sometimes you have an ending, or, you know, 2/3 of the way, and it would have been good to stop then, or go past that seemingly, and I saw this a few times, end line, fold back up and end with it, if you know what I'm talking about. So you don't always have to have a gut punch. Sometimes just ending with "I don't know" is very powerful, right? But sometimes we don't want to trail off. We need to end the monologue. Yeah. Just like when you're, I mean, I don't know, when I write a play, I often need to know the first line, and if not the last line, the last moment, before I can write the whole. Or sometimes you find your end as you're deep inside the body of it, and it reveals itself to you. But our endings could be a little stronger. So, yeah. If we were having a longer class, that is another 2 weeks, say, do you have in your mind who you would want to go to next? Do you have subjects in mind? Do you have ideas?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Well, that's an excellent sign. Okay.
I have my sister in mind who is actually the opposite of me, and her views are not represented by most of what we've written. So I was wondering, how will that fit in with anything like this?
I'm dying for that. I think that's what's missing in our in what we have right now.
Really? Oh, my.
Absolutely.
But I think I wouldn't want my face on the screen because I know what she's going to say about certain things. And, it's going to kill me, but I want to write it anyway, because I think her voice should be heard, but
Totally.
it scares me. It scares me.
I know a DACA recipient who is a Trumpster.
Wow.
Okay, now.
And I also know one of the sweetest, kindest, would give you the shirt off her back person who is also a Trumpster, young, 28 years old. So, so I do think that element is missing from.
It is
it's kind of been, for me, revealing my bias. I've kind of enjoyed its being missing, but
no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
I am so glad you brought this up. Also, we're not going to get a full picture of our times if we don't hear from them. We hear the fear of who they are, but we aren't actually getting them, right? And until we get to understand them, I don't know how far we're going to get. So we have to. Also, I'm quite interested in those people who are writing into like Common Cause and all of this and saying, a war is coming, we're getting armed, and don't think you're going to get away with this. And who are they really? I mean, of course they do it anonymously, but I would love to get inside the heart of that point of, that person. And if we have any of them who are family or friends or acquaintances, that's the best. I mean, not necessarily that extreme, but are not buying into any kind of change whatsoever. That would be, or I'm going to vote for this man again. If you do it, I want to read it. You have to send it to me.
Okay.
Find these people.
Okay.
And if you can get in there, really get in there, it's very scary. I did a whole play about a Klansman. It's terrifying. I'm not saying your sister's terrifying, but it's scary to actually talk to them and pretend you have no judgment and you just want to know. It's amazing what gets revealed. It's scary.
I also have someone that's interesting that used to be in the military and used to actually translate for the Russians. So that's also very interesting in terms of perspective, because, and I know him and I can talk to, so he's someone that would be very, very interesting to get into his mind in terms of that.
Absolutely. There's a whole other show that I am seeing here, which is listening to points of view that we probably have not heard from on an intimate level that has to do with all of this. I mean, that would be phenomenal.
I could see it as being in two parts, keeping everything intact the way it is today, because I think that the conglomeration is really powerful. If any of those other interviews that we're talking about happens, maybe that would be like a whole second piece, because I'm not so sure it would fit in right here.
I think it is, but I think one voice that is from the other side of, I don't know how to put it properly, but you know what I'm talking about. A smart person that you might even think you might love can hold these views. That's an interesting voice to hear from, even in this grouping. I mean, especially in this grouping, I think we need at least one person. Mm-hmm.
May I ask a question, please? It's okay. Oh, sorry. There were
Please.
no, I would definitely love to hear the other voices because, like Donna's piece said, her sister, she wanted her voice to be heard. I'm just curious, Emily and Corey, as we started this via McCarter, I would definitely be interested in if anyone else is to, continue something offline. I don't know if we can do that or not, because again, I would love to interview some other people and, maybe share it with the group. So I don't know if it's a possibility or not.
Well, here's what I suggest, that you don't get dependent on McCarter, because I'm no longer going to be there and Corey will no longer be responsible for this. So what I would suggest is that you form your own group and decide what you want to do. And if you want, I can consult whether I, come in or not. I don't want to make, I really don't. I don't want to make a commitment that I might regret. At the same time, I don't want to stop. I'm very torn, as you can tell. So I would suggest you stay together, and maybe Corey, who knows how to organize these things better than I, could help you do it. I mean, how would you say it could be done, Corey?
Well,
Is that your question, Lorna?
I just wanted to know if it's okay if we decided post-class to just collectively, whoever is interested, come together from time and do something.
Totally. And in fact, that's what I suggest you do.
Because I'd definitely be interested if anyone else is interested.
Right.
100%. And
you're amazing people.
It's such a great class. So I have an email that's going to go out right after we're done, and it's going to have everybody's email addresses in there, including my personal and Emily's. And I'm happy to chime in with advice on best organization and stuff like that, even as we move away from the McCarter class, because this is such great work, and it's been awesome to be a part of this with you all.
Yeah.
One last question, because Emily has to go start her new life immediately. But well, my real question is, what are you going to do the first 5 minutes of your life? But that's the other thing is, let's imagine that we spend, whatever it is, intermittently over 6 months or a year, we conglomerate something that's just absolutely fantastic and we're all happy with it. We hone it. I mean, what do you then do with it? Do you send it somewhere? Do you, what do you do with it?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to, with your permission, send the work to a couple of folks. And see what happens. But I think also there is a way, if you bring on a director, or if anyone becomes the sort of director in the group or anything else, that you start to put together a piece. Then there are ways to get in touch with different theater groups that are looking for content. A lot of people are looking for things online, especially that have to say something about the present situation. And I wouldn't wait too long. I mean, I think there's going to be a vaccine in the winter. I have a friend who's an epidemiologist, and he believes that's the case. This is an amazing thing to get out while the virus is still raging, and the days of working and the civil unrest is, I mean, I don't know how long it will all last. I mean, hopefully once the protests end, we're going to see big changes and all that. But right now we're at such a peak moment in this country that I think people are dying to hear from deep inside, all different sides of the country, That's why having one more voice who's wrestling in his or her own way with this and comes out the other end is useful. And that's the thing about when you do these patchwork pieces, because one resonates against another and butts up against another, it's one more voice. And you're not You're not, and then that's one of the things that I do and that Anna DeVere Smith does. You're not the uber judge on this. You're not putting forth one political point of view. It's not agitprop. It's going deep inside the hearts of many, many different kinds of people. And the more variety you have, the more interesting the work. I mean, in her piece, the Korean shopkeeper is, who's just railing against Black people. It's just like, oh, how can, and it sticks with you because it's also another point of view that, his shop was destroyed and he's an immigrant, and, you hear it and it's, no one was hearing his point of view on the news. No one was writing about, it was interesting. And Anna had not only the gut to include it, but to play him. She was great. It's the best performance in the piece. And someone so far away from her, right? On every level. So don't shy away from those. Those sometimes are the ones that scare you the most or horrify you the most, can be the most potent and important. Let the audience make their own decisions, and analyze it. Yeah. All right, you guys, I'm 5 minutes into my new life. So, thank you. What an amazing experience. We'll keep in touch, and please stay well, everyone, and keep working. It's beautiful, beautiful work. Okay. And thank you, auditors.
Thank you.
And thank you, all of you who've been with us. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
Well, appreciate it.
Keep in touch with me all, okay?
Okay.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Take care.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Such a gift. You have no idea. Thank you.
Amazing.